Good evening, everyone. Tony Miracker here. I am the section chair for the Toronto section, and I welcome everybody to our March meeting. It's going to be a great meeting on virtual productions. So I'm going to just move my slide deck ahead. Once I get that, there we go. Already, so things are getting back to normal because now this is the second month in a row that we've had a sponsor. So this is good that things are getting back to normal, because I think we're all hoping that it all happens soon. And we are appreciative of Grass Valley for sponsoring this evening, and we thank you. So just for this evening's meeting, which is more threads about virtual productions, it's arranged by Peter Armstrong, Rick Cederlin, and Brian Gattensby. And just so that everybody knows, Brian will be the moderator for this evening. Peter is going to manage the question box. And if you have any questions, please do put it into the question section of the Zoom tab. Our questions will all be answered at the end of all three presentations. So just to give you a heads up as to last month, we had a student-focused meeting, which was geared for our up-and-coming society, hopefully members. We had 136 people or individuals that registered. 75 ended up attending, of which 25 were SMPTE members and 50 were student affiliated. Ryerson won the evening with 42 from Ryerson University, 1 from Niagara College, 1 from York University, 5 from Sheridan College, 1 from Humber College, and 74 were from Canada, and 1 was from the US. So I'm going to hand this over to Brian. So Brian, if you want to take over the moderation portion, and just let me know when you want the slide deck changed.
Thanks, Tony. Our first presenter of the evening is Carrie Grubin. Carrie currently serves as the project director of SMPTE's Rapid Industry Solutions Onset Virtual Production Initiative. Carrie holds 3 US patents in media and entertainment technology and as a co-inventor, and has 20 years experience leading and managing studio divisions, global post-production facilities, corporate departments and groups within trade organizations. Carrie serves on the board of the Hollywood Professional Association, where she is the past chair of the Women in Post Committee and currently the co-chair of the HPA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and to give everybody an update on Rapid Industry Solutions. Many of you may have heard about the initiative, so hopefully this will give you an update on where we are right now. It's about 7 months old at the moment. It was a discussion that started back last year around this time frame. Oops, sorry. Barbara Lane came to me and asked, SMPTE's looking to see what we're going to do for the next 100 years, how we're going to be in support of our media and entertainment constituents. And there's a lot of new technologies that are, really thriving, especially with the pandemic. One was specifically on onset virtual production. So they asked me to do a research study. I conducted over 30 interviews. There was worldwide participation, and it included scripted broadcast and education respondents. And it was really clear what they said as I was talking to them. The real needs from the industry were training and education. There's a real pipeline deficiency with trained, skilled team members that can participate in this. We also aren't getting the students in, because a lot of the students that are interested in this area are going into gaming and IP and in other areas. but also too, it needed to be on multiple levels. So not just your engineering type training, it needed to be general, professional, as well as that technical training. Second big outcry was just systems interoperability. We've all lived through this with every technical evolution that we've all survived, which is these amazing technologies come into play and become available, but the connectivity always follows, just as seems to be the nature of the beast. And that interoperability challenge, whether that be plugging in devices or whether that be software-based, was something that a lot of different groups and silos were working on. And so how could SMPTE help to bring all of that together? And oh, by the way, how could we use this to look at how SMPTE runs as a business? How can we be more flexible? Not everything needed to be a standard when you have things iterating the actual process so quickly. And then how can we make this available on a wider level so that we have wider adoption? And that's where Rapid Industry Solutions came from. It really is what its name describes. It's a neutral, non-commercial platform to facilitate these rapid solutions. And the industry has said, SMPTE, make sure we have enough voices that come to the table and really take into account what the industry says that it needs, not just what SMPTE thinks that we need. So we created an industry advisory group, and that group advises the work on rapid industry solutions, and it holds SMPTE accountable to the needs of the industry. And SMPTE has always been known as the trusted place to go for information and resources. And that's where SMPTE is really leveraging its strengths in this space. We're going to curate existing deliverables. We'll develop the missing pieces, that connective tissue, to be able to actually tell an overview of a story rather than from a singular perspective, and then work on enabling that systems interoperability. As an example, it can be standards, but also too, how do we then take this information and look at a new financial model, just like you have in virtual production, where you're shifting budgets from the back end in post and in visual effects, in pushing it forward to pre-viz and tech viz. We need to start to look at how the financial model changes. So this space with Rapid Industry Solutions it's still a SMPTE run initiative, but it runs to the side, so it has more flexibility to start to experiment and test how these different funding models will work, while the full organization can still continue on the path with existing infrastructure, as we see the parts that will be beneficial and then understand what really doesn't actually bring benefit. So we have been really, really fortunate in having a wide range of companies that are participating, but it's companies, individual contributors. You've got manufacturers here. You've got game engines, you've got educational institutions, broadcasters, creative scripted folks, existing organizations that are doing their own work. And then all those ones that are circled in purple as an example, they're all new to SMPTE. So we are actually creating a space through this process of allowing an easy way for these companies to start to get involved. And I'm really excited to say, that we have over 55 advisory group members now, including companies, individual contributors, and educational institutions. So a lot of voices working on a lot of very specific, detailed information. In fact, probably our worst problem is really just not boiling the ocean, because there's so many. This was a very big initiative and so many different challenges to address to streamline the process. So we have an advisory group. That's those 55 companies and individuals. It meets monthly, first Tuesday of the month. We've been doing that since August. We surveyed everybody to get what those goals were, like what was really important in each group. And then we developed the work streams so that they could do more of the specific detailed work. We have 3: education, interoperability, and then the third, outreach, is actually embedded in the other 2 work streams, so that everything is really intrinsically tied together. It's very fluid, and it made more sense to have outreach working directly with each of these other work streams to make sure that that information got out. So as an example, These are the current focuses for the education workstream for 2022. We've been actively in the process of curating existing publicly accessible educational offerings. So if you can create a space so that someone doesn't have to go search at each individual manufacturer's education program and they can get self-serve a bunch of information, that saves a lot of time, which equals money. It also helps to create broader education for anyone who's trying to learn about the process. We're doing a lot of industry organization co-programming. It's in partnership with Outreach and the education department within SMPTE. And then I'll show you in a minute, we created a wall chart as a starting point, and we are in the process of using that as our framework, or literally as a wireframe, to build an interactive platform so that we can make a very easy, accessible way for people to get information. On top of that, we're working on looking and seeing what we need to do about missing educational content, and then a resource grant program. It was started off as like, we need inexpensive stage for students. And the students weren't just meaning university level, it was also adult learners and professional learners. And so we're trying to understand how SMPTE can facilitate, whether it's I have a stage, I can donate 4 days a year so that people can come and experiment, or I have money, or I have, hey, we have old LED volumes that they've kind of timed out in their lifespan, but that's still good for student learners. How do we put people together so that we can start to, cycle and bring these resources and the people who have the resources together? So the wall chart, this is something that I'm very, very excited because it gets accessed all the time. We're actually going to pull some statistics for the next advisor group meeting to understand how much it's been pulled. This was a way to be able to put down a foundation so everyone at least is speaking the same language. And as part of that, we use the Movie Labs visual language for media creation so that we all, again, start using the same shapes to mean the same things. It doesn't mean people can't use their own styles within their company, but when you're trying to get broad adoption, really, really important to do that. And it not only covers the actual workflow perspective, it also covers the skills and knowledge base. We felt that was really important. It is a dynamic document. You'll see there's a QR code on the upper left-hand side, right below the SMPTE logo. That's because this is a living, breathing document that as it changes, or as we have new versions, rather than having a piece of paper, many of you probably got a copy of this in the SMPTE journal. Now it dynamically changes online, and as we create new versions, that way it stays fresh and updated. We also created a companion video. We all know what we're talking about and what our 3 and 4 letter acronyms mean, but some people pointed out, like, if you weren't involved with this, you wouldn't even know what this is. So we created a companion video to explain that. Our interoperability work stream had 5 key areas, as you can see, on set, camera, ecosystems, file formats, and color science. But again, so we can't boil the ocean all at once. So we decided, and that group decided, I should say, to focus, let's start with the image itself. Let's start with capturing the image on set. So we're looking at camera metadata, as well as then as you capture all this information, how can you make sure it stays intact, it gets passed all the way down the pipeline, and how can we look at, if there's proprietary systems, bringing something together so that you can transcode to it or have some target file format so that you can understand all the characteristics and pass it through through the pipeline. And so that's what they're working on. These are the interoperability workstream initiatives. So we have this camera metadata subcommittee. We're looking at existing work that's being done by the Academy Software Foundation and others on USD and MXF. We are looking at some existing RDDs that are already in the pipeline that we may see as part of the next generation of standards, how we give that to the industry at no charge, as opposed to having it behind a paywall. and the work that RIS actually provides, the sponsorship helps to do that. And again, you can read most of these, but these are the target goals. Again, pulling together information. Right now, we have a great group that's mapping data coming out of the lenses and the cameras so that everybody, at least it's on one spreadsheet, and we can start to see, oh, here's where everybody calls this particular line item something different. How do we say, okay, this needs to map into this particular spot on a transport kind of container to be able to get it through? And then there's some practical stuff like, it'd be great to just have a toolkit, like give some virtual production color bars, framing charts. Oh, by the way, most people just want to know how to plug in when they have equipment. So do we look at expanding 2110? And these are, again, all things over the course of the 3-year project that we'll check off one at a time and get through them and start to deliver them as quickly as possible to those who need it. Outreach, as I mentioned, is embedded in the other 2 work streams, and we have quite a few speaking opportunities. So last month we were very busy. So between IBC putting out the recordings that were originally supposed to go out in December, SMPTE UK had a presentation on virtual production, EBU did as well, and then the HPA Technology Retreat Super Session, which I co-chaired, was on February 22nd, and it was a full day on virtual production. And this month, obviously, I'm here talking with all of you, giving you the update. There's an event with women in media and the SMPTE Connecticut subsection in New York that they are running a program on, I believe, the 19th of March. And then NAB, there will be a main stage spot for us on April 26th from 11:30 that it looks like we're going to be talking about like the hidden engines behind virtual production. And I don't mean game engines, I mean things like, oh, packet fabric, and how do you make sure near set solutions push information to and from? How do you look at things like Perforce that most people have never heard of until you get involved in virtual production? And then we're looking forward at places that simply hasn't normally been, like SIGGRAPH. We also have the SMPTE Media Technology Summit that's coming up in October again, and IBC. So wherever we can start to share information and then get feedback and invite more people in and more companies and ecosystem partners, that's really, really important to us. Get a lot of questions all the time. Well, are you changing standards? Like what does this mean for what SMPTE's done? It's built on standards. It's really important, and 100% it is. We had Florian Schleich, who is the new VP of Standards. Most of you may be familiar with Florian and know Florian. And really, RIS is in place, Rapid Industry Solutions, to work in partnership with the standards community, because it's a way to be proactive about understanding what the needs are in the industry, and where a standard or RDD or other process can be leveraged, then we want to start to identify those opportunities as soon as possible. So it's a very unique group of users and experts and manufacturers. We're trying to, again, point out these pain points early, proactively, as opposed to reactively. And where we can create documents and best practices and workflows that don't have to go all the way into a standards process, RIS can probably do that. But where there does need to be that heavier lift, the standards community is, again, very, very well suited to work on those needs and requirements and be able to, support the needs. So the toughest part, which I thought Florian was just so apropos and perfect with this, is that agreeing on the requirements is the difficult, time-consuming part, but everybody moving towards, once you get to that point, to actually be able to create solutions, that's where that partnership comes from. So yes, it's not around to replace standards. It's a way in partnership to identify where there's opportunities, but also pull other levers where it's more appropriate. So how can you get involved? You can contact me directly if you'd like. Also, there's a lot of information we're putting onto the website, including the wall chart and the video, the explanatory video. That is available for free for anybody who wants to use it. So you can direct clients, coworkers, bosses, anyone, students, you can direct them to that, and they can have access to that information right away. And then, of course, you can always contact the SMPTE main office. You can contact any of the chapter group leaders. They know how to find me. And then we also have a general group email for our project managers, which is listed right here as well. And you can reach out. And then if there's a particular question, someone, either myself, but whoever the most appropriate person is, will answer it and then get back to you. So lots of ways to reach out to us. And we do have Canadian involvement. Celtics is a big participant, as well as quite a few other companies that you saw earlier. So really the focus on this is, and what makes SMPTE different is it's worldwide. It covers multiple disciplines. It's not just about creative storytelling. It's also about broadcast need. And as all of our content creation worlds start to merge and fold together, this is the way really for all of us to kind of prepare ourselves for the future, understand how SMPTE grows and changes to be able to support this. And then we see what other rapid industry solutions projects are needed and plan for those in the future. So as Tony mentioned, I'm going to turn it back over, actually, I think to Andrew, or Brian, excuse me, and I'll answer some questions at the end. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Carrie.
Carrie.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to thank Carrie. That was excellent. Excellent information on that exciting new initiative. Our next presenter is Andrew Riley from Grass Valley, tonight's sponsor. Andrew is a solutions architect at Grass Valley, and his career in television broadcasting reaches all the way back to his first job at only 14 years old at a local TV station. Since then, he's previously served as an engineer in charge at NEP and as an independent contractor with Electronic Arts. Andrew's going to talk to us about Grass Valley's AMP product. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, everyone. How's it going tonight? Let me share my screen here real quick and we'll get off to the races. Hopefully you should be seeing my screen.
Yeah, we do.
Perfect. I just wanted to take a quick moment real quick to introduce myself to you all. My name is Andrew Riley. I'm a solutions architect at Grass Valley. The majority of my life has been spent obviously working in television broadcasting. I started at the age of 14 working for an independent production team broadcasting local live and post-produced content in San Diego. After graduating from San Diego State, I was hired at Mira Mobile, which eventually became NEP. My time there was spent working as an engineer in charge, and I learned so much about the challenges that we all face with live television broadcasting. Today, I wanted to take the time to discuss some overarching and honestly non-company specific benefits and challenges to cloud-based productions. Sorry, missed the introduction slide. COVID impacts. At the start of COVID, I was forced to make a career move that allowed me the opportunity to become challenged with how to make live broadcasting still happen while following strict quarantine requirements. The company that hired me for this task was Electronic Arts. Many of the staff were forced to work from home and lived in many different places around the world. My team's particular quarantine requirement was that no one was allowed to even be in the same room as each other. It would come to be that I wasn't the only production team that had these kinds of requirements, which turned out to be a real positive because it made me feel that although at times it felt like that what we were doing was crazy, we weren't completely alone. So there's some positives and there's some challenges to cloud-based productions. One positive to fully cloud-based production is the ability to have a flexible working environment for your staff. During COVID, many employees and employers recognized the need to have a hybrid working model. Not only was it a better fit, but many companies and employees shared they were more productive when given the opportunity to work from home. I know personally for me, I often found myself working longer hours as I spent time completing tasks here in the office or in the garage, in the times where I would normally be commuting to the office, right? or traveling on an airplane. Another positive thing is when you implement some cloud-based production into workflows, it can also allow for faster turnaround times for any kind of like post-produced content that you may have. Customers that work in the cloud are also able to do more shows. If you think about it, like in a traditional model, you'd have a traditional like set, shoot, strike kind of a show where you'd travel in your crew the day prior to the event, and then you'd travel the crew out the day after the event. So you'd actually would have, you know, an A team and a B team and a C team. Well, that same team can now do even more shows because now they're just doing it from home. Sorry, I lost my notes here. Cloud-based solutions also foster innovation. We are at a crossroads of IT and broadcast disciplines. And when those two fields meet, there's bound to be creativity, and that doesn't come without its own set of challenges. And so moving on to the challenges, first and foremost, internet connectivity is not always a guarantee. Many times in the field, we would have had issues of power or signal losses. I knew how to quickly handle those in person, but with cloud-based solutions, these connectivity issues presented their own set of unique challenges. Working remotely when these issues would arise, we would have to problem solve by asking questions like if the crew member had another ISP. We quickly found a pattern, just like we would in person, of how to overcome connectivity issues, or at least have a backup plan in place for if he did go down. The other thing is like capacity limitations of cloud data centers continue to be a difficult hurdle for us to overcome. Sharing servers would often lead to problems during certain times of the day where we couldn't get instances. To solve this, we looked for patterns in the regions where we were running to see when we were able to get instances to start and when we were unsuccessful. We documented these times and chose to start the computers during the times when we were more likely to be successful to start an instance. During our actual shows, however, once we had an instance started, we never stopped it because the fearing of not being able to start it again was too great. Even when working in the cloud, you cannot forget the simple physical aspects of the production. For example, even in remote-based productions, we still have to ship and send equipment. Sometimes this requires extra steps like getting things through customs, for instance. It's easy to think that cloud-based productions is solely remote, but we must remember that the hardware must still get to the employees and the talent. In some cases, we leverage solutions that utilize the crew's existing technology. However, in some cases, that technology proved to be far too out of date. In response, we developed an understanding with our IT, this was at Electronic Arts, that for our path forward, we would ensure that all engineers and staff had access to quality, high performance equipment. And I think that's the best way to, kind of move forward in this new digital age. Finally, the most time consuming challenge of cloud-based solutions is, truthfully, ensuring you have adequate remote technical support that is trained and available for your staff and talent. Because working fully remote or even hybrid has a steep learning curve. It is important to remember to be patient and supportive during the transition to working in the cloud. Some staff and talent will require more attention than others, and some may not even know how to begin to ask for help. The important thing is that we start with an understanding that this is going to be a new frontier for all. So with my final thoughts, in closing, cloud-based solutions offer unique challenges and wonderful benefits. I do believe in the long-term benefits will far outweigh any downsides. We are currently moving into a time period that will allow for creative innovation within the industry as the needs for the industry continue to evolve and change with the times. I believe we are seeing a new frontier evolve right before our very eyes, and I am excited to see how fellow engineers will implement these new technologies into new and emerging workflows. So with that, thank you, fellow SMPTE members, for inviting me to speak this evening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great. Next up, we have Edward Hanrahan. Edward is a seasoned visual effects leader with over a decade of experience working with dedicated visual effects teams on high budget productions, including The Shape of Water and The Mandalorian. In 2017, Edward joined William F. White's partners at PXO to act as a virtual production designer, where he worked on shows like Star Trek Discovery and spearheaded content, including demos, interviews, and other reels to educate clients about the features and benefits of virtual production. Welcome, Edward.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So let me share my screen here. Brilliant. Okay.
We got you.
All right, brilliant. Okay, so skip ahead. Of course, virtual production. My name is Edward Hanrahan. I'm the director of virtual production at William F. White. And yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, who William F. White is, and just a heads up, at the end of this presentation, you'll sort of have an understanding of how virtual production is changing the physical production landscape, some of the key technologies in play as far as making it happen, and some of the specific specs on different pieces of hardware that you might want to pay attention to when you're choosing your own equipment to build an LED volume, let's say. So yeah, my name's Edward Hanrahan. I've been working in VFX for many years. Of course, I worked on some of the films that have already been mentioned, and of course, The Mandalorian. Before that, I had been pushing really hard for the studios I was working for to adopt real-time solutions and technologies. And I think that's really one of the key points that is enabling this wave of virtual production to take place is real-time rendering. We'll get into some of the other things in a moment here, but that's definitely one of the key ones. And William F. White. So William F. White came to one of my earliest virtual production demos when I was still actually at Pixamundo, and they were very interested in virtual production, as a lighting tool. It was lighting the set and the stage very realistically, and they took notice of that and sort of said, hey, we should get involved and they did, and now we have 3 stages across Canada. We have 2 here in Toronto, and we have so this is the Star Trek volume. YT01 is what we call it. It's where they filmed Star Trek Discovery, and which is already released, season 4. You can take a look at that. And later this year, Star Trek Strange New Worlds will come out, which was also filmed on this stage. It's quite large. It's 72 feet in diameter, and an excellent stage. We like this stage a lot. This is YT02. This is sort of our commercial stage that we have. We rent mostly for short-term projects or commercials. This has a very low barrier to entry. We really like this stage for its educational aspects. It's often the first LED volume that people get a chance to film on or shoot on. So we do a lot of training and education at this location, so very excited about it. And then here, of course, in Vancouver, this is one of the world's largest LED volumes. It's currently, Netflix is currently filming in it. It's at the SMPTE film lot. It's an incredible structure, an incredible engineering feat. You can see here there's two stories to it. Of course, the catwalks in the very ceiling, and then the service floor around the outside. You can see this is 80 feet in diameter with a 28-foot ceiling. It's absolutely enormous. But yeah, a very cool LED volume build. Yeah, so there you go. And of course, I do just want to say, virtual production, what is it exactly? Well, it's an umbrella term. It incorporates a lot of different technologies. Right now, of course, in-camera VFX or LED volumes are really, the most iconic that I think everybody is familiar with. But those come in a couple of different flavors, either pop-up on set or permanent installs, which is generally what we do. It's a little bit more efficient, but there's lots of options there. But virtual production's been around for a number of years. And of course, things like previs and techviz, these are all types of virtual production. Simulcam or any kind of viewing device that's overlaying real world camera feed with CG elements live on set for directors and DPs to line up shots and frame them correctly. These are all types of virtual production. Yeah, it's definitely coming a long way, but it's been around for a while, and it's important, I think, to remember that. Why do we need VPROD? Green screens are great. They've been around for a really long time. I built my career on them. They're fantastic. But there's much cooler and newer tools that I think we need to roll into the filmmaking process. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to efficiencies. I think one of the big things to realize here is there's more content being produced now than at any point in history before. And we need to find efficiencies in the filmmaking process. And that's more time with the camera rolling and less time doing, logistically moving people to and from locations, or rain days, or, waiting for a cloud to move out of the way. And virtual production can really help with all that. And the end result, I hope, from all this is that people are getting a better quality of life. And we're not on set filming until 2 a.m. in the middle of the winter outside. I've been there and I've done that. And now it's like, hey, if you have the opportunity, let's film it in a soundstage in a controlled environment. We can control all the elements, and we can get our shots and we can get home on time. So hopefully that's where we're headed with tech like this. Yeah, and of course, there's a lot that's happening as far as scheduling is going. This is a big change to the industry. Everybody is familiar with sort of the waterfall workflow of pre-production, production, post-production. But virtual production is really changing that. And I think this will be one of the biggest challenges that the industry needs to sort of overcome. And I think it's going to have to sort of travel all the way up to the C-suites and all the way back down. But I think that's why education right now is so important. And why working with producers and executives at different networks and streamers, and of course, even unions and DPs and directors and the DGC and SMPTE and all these different industry players. How do we get the word out, and how do we get everybody familiar with this tech, and how do we get the most out of it? And that's something that's really quite, we spend a lot of time on at William F. White. And this week we started building sort of our training facility in Toronto here. We just really want to get this tool into people's hands for them to start learning and experiencing it, because it's not a magic silver bullet, but it has some really great strengths. And the more people understand those, the more we'll get out of it, and the better and more efficient our content creation will be. So just generally, what would I tell you virtual production is good for? Well, it's really good at 3D environment work. It's bread and butter. It's what we see on The Mandalorian. It's what we see on Star Trek. That's sort of the go-to use case for it. Of course, there's poor man's process or process work, driving plates, playback. It's great for that, accurate reflections on cars and all that. It just looks really, really nice. Car comps, have that look, and have had that look for 20 years. And we all know when people are driving and they're shot on green, has a very specific look. It's a terrible look. So we're glad to, kind of move away from that. If your production needs to travel a lot, well, that's something, especially if they're traveling to locations that might not have great infrastructure, if you're shooting a lot out in the forest, or even just locations that are very far apart, around the world. These are the sort of scenarios where virtual production might help solve some of your problems. But of course, there's limitations as well. If your show does a lot of walk and talks, stages are only so big. We can only walk so far. There's a number of ways we can cheat it to make it longer, but it's a challenge and it's something to be very aware of. Creatures and characters, characters, of course, we have to cross sort of the uncanny valley. That's a big issue. And I don't know if we're really there yet. And of course, creatures are very processor intensive. And I'm not sure if our hardware computers are there yet, but they will be. Those are coming along. And extreme angles. If you do a lot of, bird's eye view or worm's eye view, you're going to have to shoot around that on a virtual production volume. Even just the raking angle of a camera across the surface of LED panels, they have a given viewing angle that's ideal. And as soon as you start moving to the extremes of that, you're going to notice color aberration and other issues. So the more standard your shots are, I think you're going to have an easier time interacting with the volume. So here, here's a very simple look at what a LED system could look like. At its core components are really the LED screens, the LED controllers or the projectors in this case. The inputs, so we normally do clustered rendering on our stages, and so we have our operator machines, our master PCs, and then we have the render nodes that are actually driving the wall. Of course, connected to a network switch and a Genlock signal generator. There's a lot of technology in play on a stage. We're going to get into that in a couple of slides, but it all has to be firing at the same time, and everything needs to be recording the frames on the same beat, or we're going to run into issues. Certainly, if we are firing the camera and recording a frame while we're out of sync with the wall, we're going to notice, we can get sort of smudging or dark black smearing that you'll kind of notice, or other similar effects. But making sure all this technology, everything on set is really firing at the same time is really our friend. It's not so much an issue when you're standing there on set, looking at it with your eye. But at the end of all this, we're going to go back through this footage and look through it frame by frame, and any imperfections are going to be called out, and there's steps we can take to avoid that. So we spend a lot of time making sure all these pieces of technology are working together and communicating, so that we're getting the most out of it. And again, it comes back to efficiencies. Nobody wants to nobody wants to notice imperfections in the footage at the end, and then all of a sudden, hey, well, we're going back to post anyways, just to fix these problems that could have been avoided. So, you know, we spend a lot of time on that. Okay, so what goes into it? LED stages have lots of different parts. We have the LED controllers, which is, you know, I talked about briefly a second ago. We have the XD breakout units that distribute the processed footage to the LED panels into the walls. So it's another step we'll talk about some more. Genlock, of course, really keen on that. Unreal Engine, this is the software that we're most familiar with. There's definitely other tools available out there. But our stages run off Unreal Engine. It's sort of, you know, at this point, it's definitely the industry standard, I think, for a lot of the studios. As far as content creation and playback and anything we need to do to get the signal to the LED controllers. Camera tracking, this is sort of the secret sauce that really sells the illusion of people being in a space. Of course, it gives us parallax, and we can pass that camera data along in the VFX pipeline for additional work if we need to. But it's really, really valuable data, and it really is the trick that makes a lot of this stuff a convincing sort of illusion. The stage clock, of course, we do need to genlock stuff and keep it all in sync. So stage clock comes into play for that. And the camera and the lens, these are, you know, definitely play into a successful virtual production look. At the end of the day, we're trying to create sort of an integrated world between a practical foreground and a virtual backdrop or background. Super crisp lenses, you know, are super crisp, and they capture the subtle differences between these two, and in a lot of ways they can highlight the sort of astringency of looking at an LED wall. It might be the look that a certain project is going for, but generally we see people tending towards lenses that have a little bit more character or imperfections, and sort of a very nice roll off into like heavy depth of field. That gives you a lot more control on set to as far as how far you can play your talent and in camera from the wall. So in a sense, it expands the operational range inside the volume that you're able to shoot effectively and get good results in. So it is something we see most people looking for these low T value lenses. So, you know, T1, T1.4. This is, you know, definitely the industry trend at the moment. Cool. So LED processors. This is the from Unreal. This is where we're sending the signals to the LED processor to get it ready to go onto the wall. There's lots of different companies out there, and you know, they all have pros and cons, I would tell you. We generally were using the SX40. This is a premier LED controller. But the main reasons we really like it, what we think it's really good at, and the things that I think people need to watch out for and pay attention to when they're choosing their LED controller. You know, you definitely want something that's HDR compliant. You want to maintain as much color information at this stage before we go to the wall, or even on the wall. We want as much color range and as much color data as we can get. We don't want to be adding any LUTs or curves to the footage at this point. Again, this is still production. We are going to we are going to add those creative color choices in post-production and then in a later step. But yeah, definitely having HDR compliant processors is important. The SX40 also does really well with low luminance content. Some LED processors can create banding around light sources, especially like if you're looking at like the halo of a bright object in a room or something, you can get banding. And some panels with a processor won't respond as well at low luminance performance. They'll start to swing sort of blue into the blue spectrum, and just having something that is optimized and plays back really well with low light or low luminance footage is going to save you time later on down the road. Not all footage is outdoors in daylight, although that is something that works really, really well on virtual production stages. And of course, so we have the LED, the processor, of course, that processes the footage coming from Unreal, but we still need to distribute it to the wall. For this, generally we use the Brompton XE distribution units. This is ostensibly a network switch with 10 1 gig lines in a trunk that we can run to the processor. So after that, we can get to the wall, we can get to one of our columns, and we can daisy chain up the wall panel to panel after that point. This is really a lot of cable cable organization, optimization. We're keeping the runs as short as possible and as organized as possible, which is a huge benefit when we're on set. We're building a volume that is going to have a lot more tech added into it. It's going to have a lot of people on it. It's a film stage. There's a lot of stuff going on, and we want to minimize our cabling. One, for efficiency, and two, just to keep it out of people's way, and keep the entire structure as clean and organized as possible. Processing the footage is step one, but distributing it to the wall is sort of step two. Camera tracking. This is kind of the secret sauce. There are sort of two main types of camera tracking. There's inside out and there's outside in. They both have pros and cons. The OptiTrack and Vicon systems, which we use on, which is what we tend to use on our stages. These rely on an array of cameras sort of located around the periphery of the stage, and they triangulate the movement of the camera inside of a predetermined volume, and drive a virtual camera inside Unreal off that, any changes in position to that. These systems are great. They're very, very accurate. They do have a larger, they're expensive, that's for sure, and they have a longer install process, and they also need calibration. So they do come with a couple of drawbacks, but they definitely give you the purest, cleanest data on the market at the moment. So we're tending towards that right now. We have spent a lot of time certainly with NCAM and Red Spy, which are inside out. These are small pieces of hardware that attach to the camera body itself, and stream data out that way. These are very quick to set up. They are very efficient in that regard. And, if you were doing sort of a mobile solution or moving between volumes, this is definitely a viable option. They do come with more latency than we like at the moment, but I would expect that to be resolved over time. So I think the industry will probably, lean towards these tools more in the future. Yeah, so sort of two main types of tech there to keep an eye out for. Sync in the stage clock. We tend towards the Everett's. So excellent clock, provides everything you need for an LED volume and keeping all of the technology in sync together, which of course is a big priority for us. Okay, so all that to be said, this is more accurately represents what a full-on setup looks like on a stage. So this has a lot more of the different techs and different types of tech represented on it. Of course, we have our end display nodes going to our LED processors. We have the master clock that's keeping time for the stage. And of course, our camera, which we're tracking, we're solving that, we're driving we're sending that signal through the network switch to our render nodes, and all in real time, and we're updating the frame on the LEDs. The purpose here is to do this, as many times a second as we can. Currently, I think the biggest drawback or technical challenge that we face is just our rendering power, which is, definitely something that, a lot of industry heavyweights are pushing for more computer power, so that's good. But a lot of the technology on here is operating at hundreds of hertz, if not thousands of hertz. Yeah, if we, we would love to be able to do sort of high frame rate footage playback on our LED volumes. Right now, it's not super feasible. It is a question we get asked a lot. We generally recommend people stick to 24 FPS, maybe 48, depending on the content. But the only thing really holding that back, of course, are the render nodes. Everything else on the stage operates at hundreds or thousands of hertz. So what makes a good panel for virtual production? We tend towards the Black Pearl 2 V2s. They're a high hertz, low scan rate HDR panel. Definitely, there are a number of other products entering the market now with a very high refresh rate and low scan rates. So I think that's great. You're having competitive products enter the market. For a long time, the Black Pearl 2 V2 was the only panel that was operating, I think, at 7600 hertz. But you're definitely seeing other ones enter the market now. AOTA, Blizzard Pro, these guys are all coming out with their own line of camera ready LED panels. And that's a great thing. The technology that's available on the market in a lot of senses is borrowed from different industries. And I'm really excited. I think this year and next year, we're going to see very specific technology created from the ground up for virtual production. And I think we're just starting to see that now, which is really, really exciting. Because we are jumping through a lot of hoops right now to make all these different types of tech work together. And the more we can standardize that and eliminate these sort of complexities, it's going to make it just that much more accessible for people that want to get involved. The other things that, of course, play into your decisions on panels would be pixel pitch. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Color accuracy and representation. A lot of these panels, there's only a couple of actual diode makers out there. So most of the time, these, different panels are probably using very similar actual physical components. And, some of the most common are the Nation Star SMD 1550 blacks. You'll see these pop up a lot. We'll talk about, what exactly that means in a sec. But of course, yeah, refresh rates, which we will even talk about a little bit more too. Scan rates, panel construction, white LED versus black LED. All of the panels that you guys probably ever come across will be black LED. That's what this black up here sort of represents, but I'll show you what that is exactly referring to in a second here. And power draw. Power draw might not be the coolest thing about virtual production, but it's a big part of it, especially when you look at our Vancouver volume. It's drawing almost $2,500 of electricity per day. So that's a big cost that productions consider and you have to think about when you're building one of these volumes. This is a cost that you have to pass on to the client. So power draw definitely factors into that. So here we go. White LED versus black LED. This is just the housing for the LEDs. White LEDs are brighter. It's an older technology. It's the original type of LED that really went into any sort of panel. But black LEDs are what is used on film. They have a higher contrast. And more vibrant colors, which are two of the things that people obviously are really looking for when they're shooting something. And you'll see down here the 5050 SMD LED chip. So these numbers, like 1515 here, or 5050, they refer to the actual dimensions of the diode. So this is a 5.0 millimeter would be 5050, and then this would be a 1.5 millimeter diode. The SMD just means surface mounted device. It's the LED diode is embedded in a circuit board on the panel. So that's a little bit about those types of tech. And then of course, the scan rate. This is something that maybe isn't talked about. It's not one of the most common specs you would even see on a panel. You normally have to dig a little bit for it, but it plays quite heavily into virtual production. It goes hand in hand with the refresh rate of the panel and directly affects the power draw, of course. Again, that's part of it. Yeah, so static mode LEDs, this, if we call this sort of a module of an LED panel, static would be every single diode is on at the same time. This isn't the way that the panels are generally operated. The goal is to make it look like they are like this, but of course they are refreshing sort of constantly. And the scan rate would be what fraction of the diodes are on at any given point in time. So 1/12 would be, 1/12 of the diodes are illuminated at any point, versus 1/6 is we would have 2 rows sort of lit up. And this plays into a lot of things. Obviously the power draw, we have twice as many lights on at any given point here, but it's also twice as bright. That's a bit of a generalization. It's not always accurate, but generally speaking, this is, so yeah, scan rate, quite important. But when you take our refresh rate, which is maybe it's 7,600 hertz, and we're not in static mode, of course, it's a fraction of these diodes that are being illuminated. So if you take 7600 hertz, but you're only at 1/6 of the scan rate, you're really putting it down to 1280 hertz. So there's a little bit of math there to understand, but all of these kind of factor into what makes a really great panel, which is, you know, you want as many pixels illuminated at a given point. That's going to give you a more robust image. If you have a low scan rate panel, and certainly if you're not gen locked, you will notice dips in the illumination when your camera records a frame at an inopportune moment. So all of these things are connected, and it's really why we come back to sort of gen locking and syncing the entire stage together so much. Yeah, I just wanted to dig into some of that stuff about the panels a little bit more. So yeah, and of course, pixel pitch. Okay, so we hear a lot about moire on LED walls. It is probably everybody's biggest concern when they first step onto the stage, and probably most people overcome that fear very quickly. It's not too much of an issue once the team is familiar with it. It is something to watch out for. You know, what is it? It's when sort of a repetitive pattern. Its detail exceeds the sensor resolution of the camera, and that's kind of the rub here, is that as we decrease the pixel pitch and increase the resolution of the wall, we increase our chances of causing a moire effect in our footage. So balancing the sensor of the camera and the pixel pitch of the wall is something that I think, you know, this industry will sort of figure out together, and, you know, where are the magic numbers and what those are, and I'm sure we'll develop tools that'll mitigate it over time. But yeah, right now it's definitely a lower pixel pitch isn't necessarily the best solution, or, you know, for every situation. You know, and stage construction. So I talked a lot about panels. Building the stages themselves is a big construction and engineering feat. This is our volume in Vancouver. You can see this is just after the catwalks go up. People need a lot of access up there to either remove panels and hang cinema lights in there, whether they're, you know, like if they want spotlights or RE orbiters or whatever, directional lights that add you know, clear and defined shadows, which LED panels or LED volumes don't generally you know, don't generally provide. People are up there all the time, popping panels in, dropping lights, or stunt rigging or whatever. So, you know, there's catwalks. We do a support floor in there as well. And of course, we hang the ceiling and all of the panels. Off of this ceiling in Vancouver, I think the entire structure that was suspended was about 115,000 pounds. So a really significant engineering undertaking. And of course, you know, we're doing site surveys, we're having structural engineers evaluate the building, we're talking to the architects. There's a lot to consider before investing millions of dollars in a very expensive ceiling. Not even to mention the you know, if you don't do all that research, you know, something could go terribly wrong. So it's a very big consideration when you first start thinking about a project like this. Generally, you would want to allot a number of months for a build like this. And probably half of that time is going to be your ceiling installation. Putting up the wall itself is very straightforward, and can be done in a week or a little bit more with a competent team. But the ceiling installation and suspending all of the rigging that needs to go up there, it's a massive undertaking. Yeah, and then, just sort of as a final note, I think the most important thing I would ever tell anyone about virtual production or wanting to use virtual production on a project is that it's the earlier you start, the more success you're going to have. And that it goes across the board. I think it applies to every stage of, whether it's the starting designs on the build, whether it's the site surveys, whether it's the content creation, but working with everybody and making the decision to go virtual production, the sooner you can in a project, the more success you'll have and the more you'll be able to get out of it. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. That was kind of my talk. So thank you.
Great.
Edward, thank you.
Thank you, Edward.
So-
Well, we have a few questions. You kind of covered there's these questions, but I'll ask them again anyway. For the Genlock, do you use analog or BB or IPST 2059 PTP or PTP for your Genlock system?
Generally, yeah, we're using, we have used Blackburst and Tri-Level Sync are two of the most common approaches that we're taking. A lot of the time, we want to provide robust solutions, and there's considerations that people bring to the set. So there's no one definitive answer. It really depends on what other technology people also need to incorporate into the network. Yeah.
Okay.
There was also a question from Lee, do you use timecode? And if so, which type?
We do use timecode. I believe that, I want to say it's Vitsi off the top of my head. Yeah. But yeah, recording timecode is definitely part of it. Yeah.
And you mentioned frame rate of 24 frames a second generally, or does anybody ever use a higher rate than that?
We can push it to 48, but we do start running into if you have a very complex scene, it's the render nodes that are really holding us back at that point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Brad Dixon is here, and he knows a lot about this stuff, and you may know. He had a couple questions, and looks like Carrie, you answered some of them. I don't know whether Brad wants to needs more elaboration on them or not. But I will ask one of Brad's questions here that wasn't answered. How do you maintain hue values when the video walls dim, since the LEDs often dim at various levels due to the nature of the RGB LEDs? And our LED may OT dim in the same ratio as the green LED.
Yeah, so this is bang on. This is one of the things that the Brompton processors help mitigate. They have a specific name for the technology they incorporate in there, but yeah, that's exactly correct. Keeping a consistent color as you change the luminosity of the wall is a challenge, and looking for a processor that's going to help mitigate that is definitely something that you want to make sure. So again, I don't want to hawk any particular brand. There's great brands across the board out there. But yeah, looking for a processor that can help with that is going to save you a number of headaches. Yeah.
Okay. And Edward, does UE5 have any technical benefit in DP space?
So this kind of ties into the frame rate issue. So with UE5, we're noticing it's more performant across the board. So even on the content and the computers that we are running on now, we're getting better frame rates. It's a newer tech, built from the ground up with stuff like this in mind. Probably not its most important consideration, but yeah, it's definitely a performance increase, which is going to translate into better, higher frame rates, and of course better looking content being displayed. So those are two very real world, very obvious benefits that were, even though Epic hasn't really rolled out its tool set for UE5 yet. We talked to Epic a lot, and they're hoping sort of, in their mind, I think it's late summer would be somewhat realistic for them to start talking about it more. We already know that there's some tangible benefits there. Before anything else gets developed, we're already a huge step ahead of where we were. So. Yeah.
And I guess for those who aren't deep into this stuff, UE5 would be Unreal Engine 5.
Yes.
Yes, correct. Exactly. Yeah.
So I have a question. I assume there's a bunch of noise that's generated by the LED walls. And obviously a heat load too. So like your big studio, your big setup in Vancouver, well, how do you deal with that as far as air conditioning, the heat load? And what about the sound? Like when you're on that stage, it's got to be, what kind of sound level are you dealing with, and how are you dealing with that?
So these are these are great questions. The stages do get warm. The good news is these buildings that we put our stages in they're gorgeous, purpose-built film studios. They're climate controlled, AC, all that, HVAC. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Like one of them is we need structures that are big enough to support something like this. So the Vancouver is a 40-foot ceiling clear span. So you really need a purpose-built building for that. Power draw. And of course, like you said, a really robust climate control system is the first, step to helping with that. For audio, I didn't touch on this too much, but there's a number of audio challenges on these volumes. They are a hard plastic surface that acts as an amphitheater. So there is like a reverb and echo sort of effect that you get when you're standing in sort of the center of them. We actually just today, we've developed some really cool sound baffles at William F. White that we're trying to arrange to get them and some audio engineers down to film stage to measure their impact. And we when we were in discussions with these audio guys, we were saying, hey, we're noticing the reverb, and they were saying, well, hey, what about the sound of the panels and the fans in the back, the heat sinks? So we're taking, that was something that, I'm not an audio guy. I'm not gonna say I know too much about it, but we're really excited to get with these guys at one of the volumes and measure this stuff, so we can say, hey, these are the these are some actual numbers that we're recording on set, and how can our baffling reduce it? So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that at some point after we've completed some testing. But yeah, sound is a hurdle, and it's
So a lot of
often
ADR then, or shoot Mandalorian style where you can't see the guy's mouth.
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on the show. I mean, I think certainly some streamers are bringing their own baffling and moving it around. But it's just another one of these hurdles that doesn't sort of get the limelight as often as the visuals, you know? So really excited to get to work on that.
Okay. We have another one from Brad. Have you used established calibration tools like the DSC screen alignment system that is calibrated to SMPTE values to calibrate your walls to the needs of the camera? The DSC screen alignment system has already been used for projectors and monitors to appear accurate on camera.
I have not. But this does seem like something that I'm going to investigate. So yeah, thank you for that.
Right. So another quick thought on off the top of my head is, so just give me a little background about color space then. I'm like, what is the color space that you say you're going to leave that to the post world, but what kind of color space are we dealing with on those LED panels, and how are the cameras seeing that?
Yeah, so these LEDs, most LEDs, which, you know, one of the most common, you know, the actual diodes that we talk about, the Nationstar 1550s, you know, they are, I think, about 96% P3 accurate.
Okay.
So, you know, pretty good. And when I was at my previous company, we did a lot of testing and calibration with a company whose name is escaping me at the moment. But yeah, maintaining an accurate color space that is, you can create sort of that is flexible enough to create like a good looking product at the end of it. This is a big goal for a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, in the I know last month, I think Ari came out with their lighting and color analysis in the I want to say the ASC magazine, where they compared the full spectrum lighting of the cinema lights to the lighting spectrum that they were getting off the LED walls, and they did a really fantastic deep dive into it. So, you know, really great reading. I would definitely direct people towards that article and what they measured and talk about. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Peter, if I can jump in here.
Yep.
I just have a question for Carrie, and listening to and watching your presentation, there's so much going on, and my head was about to explode. But at what stage of the game can we, at the section level, help move this forward? Or the sense that I'm getting, you're already in third gear and the bus is moving.
Well, everyone who wants to participate, in theory, can participate, because obviously, you know, SMPTE has a long history of volunteers creating all these deliverables and assets. And so some of our biggest challenge is just making sure that we have people to start to manage and be responsible for the workflow. So as an example, right now we're doing the collection of existing educational materials, as well as having the companies participating in Rapid Industry Solutions self-identify the areas that they cover in the wall chart. Now, it doesn't mean that we certainly couldn't go through and assign companies to that, but there's many companies that have crossover that you may or may not be aware of. So wherever there are volunteers who want to help in any of the work streams to get some of the work done, it means that we can get more done. Part of the funding model for RIS is this sponsorship model where we have people and companies participate and fund the project up front so that we can use the deliverables or deliver the results at no charge. So that does pay for dedicated resources. So if we, so as an example, we have a domestic US student who we're actually paying to help us pull and create the metadata against some of the information that we have. But again, there's always room for people to participate. And yeah, you just have to reach out to me. And if you're a SMPTE, obviously as chapters, if you're SMPTE members, right, you get to participate as individual contributors. Companies can get involved. For-profit companies, you know, we can talk about, and I can talk one-on-one as far as kind of what that sponsorship model looks like. Depending on the size, you know, we try to make sure that it fits the right level. But yeah, all are welcome. It's where you feel like you bring your most value. So yeah, if you had a group that was within your chapter that wanted to help, that would be great. As we start to develop some of these other programs, you know, that will be for education and potential resource granting and so forth. That's where being able to put together those who are in need with the resources that, you know, obviously chapters are going to have insights on, hey, I know of X, Y, and Z university. I know about these programs that help professional learners get information. You know, that's where through the network of all of us kind of watching this and having it visible, that we can have a bigger impact.
Good, cool.
And I got a question, Carrie, about the wall chart.
Yes.
Has there been any changes to it since you and I worked on it last fall?
Well, the only
Is there a new
change,
version?
there isn't a new version yet, but we're in the process now, which I didn't put into the presentation only because it was time limited, is that we're working on now what we're going to do to start to make an MVP, so the minimum value product of what the wall chart deep dives will be. Mm-hmm. And so we've added in an updated logos, you know, for new RIS members, because we did have more people join since it was created, but the actual chart and the next version of the chart we haven't started because now we're going to use that as the framework.
Okay. Cool. All right. We have another question from Rick or Edward. There have been experiments conducted with multi-camera LED wall digifilm style scenarios, perhaps using the super high refresh rates of the walls, with cameras seeing different images on the backgrounds? Question mark?
Yeah, there are definitely companies working on products like that and solutions like that. I'll be really excited to see where they go. Yeah, one that comes to mind right away is Ghost Frame, where they're doing exactly that. They're utilizing the high refresh rate of the wall and you know, trying to capture a frame of the actor mid-action on green, and then as well another frame where he's, you know, on a backdrop. There's a ton of potential there, and yeah, I'll be really excited. That'll definitely come out as a robust workflow, 100%, because the benefits to it are enormous. And there's, you know, already at this point, people have sort of proof of concept out there in the wild. So yeah, check out, it's called Ghost Frame. And that's just one that pops to mind, but I'm sure there's others out there.
I've got a question, Edward. What's the tipping point, so to speak, that would make a company for a production decide to go LED wall versus green screen? Like, where does that become, where does it start to make sense? Because obviously there's a lot more stuff involved, right? Like with the walls themselves and everything, right?
Yeah, that is going to be different, obviously, for every production. And some companies are just very bullish on the technology. Like we know Netflix is super excited about it, and they're really they're really keen on educating the industry and working with people that are excited and interested in virtual production. So they almost go out of their way to make sure that they're pushing the wheel forward, which is fantastic to be able to work with people like that. And other productions have they need to travel to tell their story, but they've been burned on, if you want 30 or 40 people filming in Iceland for 3 weeks, you go there one season and you spend $1.5 million, and you say there's got to be a better way to do this. So some people are coming at it from that perspective, where they say, hey, the travel's not going away, but we can't do this every episode. So they look for other solutions. And at this point, I tell people it's an expensive tool right now. It is coming, it is coming out. And one of the realities is, William F. White is, you invest in these panels, you invest in this setup, and you buy it, and you hope you can pay it off, and then you can sort of demonetize it, and you can get it into more and more people's hands, and you can expand the network of stages that are available, and you can drive the price down. And it's a process, and we're still at like the very super early, tipping, it's still so nascent. I know so many people are excited about it, and it's one of these things where it's still got a ways to go before it's super accessible. And I think the best thing we can do right now is just get people familiar and educated about it and with it, and build a really strong foundation. And as we can get people familiar, and as we can lower the price, that tipping point will get, we'll move,
Great. Well, you've done a great job in that, on that education front tonight. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions in the queue. So Tony, turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I just take a couple of minutes here and thank every one of our presenters. Did a great job this evening, and definitely had some stimulating thoughts and where this technology is going. And Edward, I think you're right that this is just it's almost like a brainchild of somebody that's going to grow, and I think it is going to grow to as being part of education and things of that nature through the various teaching organizations, universities, and that. So it's definitely going to multiply. I am going to put up a blank screen here only because I'm going to try something different that we missed out on last week. I was going to put a question in the survey, but missed out. So I'm going to do this, and I don't know whether or not this comes up on your screen or not. Oh, it does. I've got an on-air check monitor here, and I see. So if you guys can all kind of put in your answers here, because again, we are trying to make sure that we do things properly, and we don't want to overdo things. So the more that everybody can tell us what it is and how we're doing, that would be very useful for us at the board level to make sure that we make sure that we bring in enough speakers to educate everyone. So I see, I've never done this before, so I'm seeing something different than you guys are, so. So that is, okay. So I'm going to end the poll because I think there are, it has stopped clocking. And then now I can share the poll. And so you seeing the same thing? Yeah, you are. So 21 or 78% say current and interesting, 15 say okay, and 4% and 4% say take a pass and a rethink. So, okay, those are good numbers. And we thank you for that. So I'll take that back to the board and we'll keep, as a DJ would say, keep the hits coming. So let me do that and do that. Okay. So just so you know, I know that some of the bios we read by through very quickly this evening. So this is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel once Peter gets it all cleaned up. And then you can stop the video and read everybody's bio, because I know there was a lot of information there. So you have the opportunity to do that. Future meetings, April the 12th is a standards update. May the 10th is going to be an NEB wrap up. It's interesting to say NEB because we haven't said that word in a few years now. And our June 14th meeting, we're still trying to figure that out. We're hoping that is going to be our first face-to-face. And if our Toronto section does remember, that is barbecue month. So we have a barbecue in play for members. So we're hoping that that all comes back in June. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that. So we had a contest last month, and there was 5 books that were given away by Brian. So those are the winners. Belo was one, Brooke was another, Manda, Lisanne, and Ken are the 5 individuals. 4 were students, and 1 Ken was not a student. So that's great, great material for the students to read up on media workflows. Every time this time this year, we have an election process that goes on at home office for local section board members. So the elections, you'll be notified of who's running on March the 21st is when the elections open, and April the 25th is when it closes. Up-to-date information you can get on our website at SMPTE.org/sections/Toronto. And if you want to become a friend, if you're not a SMPTE member, you can point your browser to the URL listed there, and you can join us as a friend, and you'll get emails every time we send out an email blast. And here are our social connections of where you can get a hold of us or see various feeds from us. And that's it. I thank everybody again for participating. I thank everybody for the presenters for being on board with us and making a great meeting. And we'll see you in April for this standards update meeting. Thanks, everybody.